Hello, I'm old Mr. Kent, 82 years old on my morning e-trike ride, and it really is morning. It's real warm. In fact, I'm a little warm with my flannel on, but it's not that bad. And this is the day after President's Day of 2025. I thought I would talk about President's Day because they usually have big sales on President's Day. And so my wife, she's a quilter, and Joann's Fabrics is going out of business. And so, which is sad, I'll talk about that a little bit. It's sad because there's not that many fabric stores anymore like there used to be. Things change, you know. Anyway, so she went up to the Joann's fabric store and bought out all of the what do they call it? Yeah, it's what they put in between the I know the name. I'm just getting old and forgetful. Anyway, it's the padding that they put in to make the quilt. And she bought all that they had left. And so it just barely fit in our car, our little VW. So anyway, so that's what she bought. And so, but it reminded me of the first time I took advantage of President's Day. And by the way, quilting, it used to be, we've seen in my generation and the couple of generations before me, we've seen a lot of changes, especially in this country. For instance, our daughter in Pasco, Washington, where we used to live, she has a quilting machine. And her quilting machine, she's, in fact, as I make this video, she's running this quilting machine, which, a quilt has a whole bunch of, has a layer of material, and then the padding, and then a layer of material, and then it has to all be stitched together. And so she's running her computerized quilting machine that does all the stitching, goes around, does all the stitching, and puts everything together to make a nice quilted blanket. And so that's how she does it. Well, when my wife did it years ago, she had this frame which she stretched everything out on with a batting. That's what it's called, the batting in between. And then she, by hand, stitched everything together by hand. And then her mother, when she quilted, I'm sorry, she did it with the same method. She made me a quilt once, and she put it together with yarn, stitched it together with yarn. But she used her sewing machine to sew all the little pieces together to make the top layer. But my wife's grandmother, when she sewed all the pieces together to make the top layer, because they take a whole bunch of different pieces and put them together, she did all those pieces by hand. Now, my wife's mom, she sewed them all on a sewing machine, and my wife, she sews them all those pieces together on a sewing machine. But my wife's grandma, she didn't sew those pieces together on a sewing machine. She sewed them together by hand. Well, as time has gone by, now, why are the fabric stores closing? Because this generation doesn't do any sewing. They order their clothing, their blankets, probably from China, and so there's no need for a sewing machine. Plus, they don't have time. They're watching things on TV and the internet, and things have changed so much in the last. Well, I would say my generation and the generations before that, a couple of generations before mine, everything has changed so much. So anyway, that hasn't got anything to do with President's Day, but just stop to think about it. Things have changed so much, and of course, we had the Industrial Revolution, which took place late 1800s, early 1900s, and then we had the Electrical Revolution, and then when the transistor came along, which they started, the Bell Labs started studying in the 1920s, and by, oh man, I learned about transistors and how to program with them back in the 60s, and back then, your television screen was is called a CRT, cathode ray tube. It was a tube. Now your television screens and all that stuff is a flat screen. It's all transistors. It's solid state. So anyway, that's just things change. But let's get back to President's Day. So my first President's Day was in 1966. I graduated from college in 1965 and worked for Boeing for a little while, and then moved to Pasco, Washington, and was a teacher. And on President's Day, and I think back then they hadn't switched it to Monday. I think back then they were still making like everything that, like the 4th of July was on the 4th and still is. But all the other national holidays were on a specific date. And so this might be a history lesson. And so like if it was on the 14th of some month and it happened to be on a Wednesday, then school was out on Wednesday, and everybody celebrated whatever that national holiday was. And then it happened that if that national holiday happened to be on a Monday, well, then everybody had a 3-day holiday, and they thought that was great. And that's how it used to be. If it just happened on a Monday, well, then everybody had a 3-day holiday. And then also the fuel companies, oil companies, they noticed that their sales went way up whenever there was a holiday on a Monday. And so they lobbied the Congress to change things so that all of these holidays, that the national holidays that are on a specific date, just celebrate it on the closest Monday. And they changed it so that now the national holidays are on the closest Monday, all except for July 4th. They couldn't change that one. And so now President's Day, whatever date it was supposed to be on, is always on a Monday. Pardon me. So there's another history lesson for you. So anyway, so back when it was on, I don't remember what day it was on, but anyway. So my wife and I, we saw all these, they're having sales and everything. And we had this old Chevy, and now if I can't remember that, Corvair. Yeah, it wasn't a Corvette. No, it was a Corvair. It was Chevrolet's air-cooled comparison to the VW. And it was a nice little car. It was air-cooled, and it ran fine. And we'd had or actually it was my wife's car before we got married, and so we just kept it and drove it. The only thing it was getting old, and like if we were going up a mountain pass on a warm day, then it would start to lag because it was getting overheated, which meant that the everything was expanding, and it was the parts were rubbing together, and it would start to slow down. It was overheating. So then we would slow down or go over to the side of the road and let it cool off, and then we're going up. So on President's Day that year, they had some sales at the VW shop, and so we went over there. This was in 1966, and they had a 1963 VW bus. I'd never had a VW, but I liked them, and I never will forget when they first came out. My dad, I was just a little kid, probably 6, 7 years old. My dad took me shopping with him. He wanted to go look at them, and I remember looking at a VW Bug, thinking it was pretty cute. Anyway, so we went in and we bought a 1963 VW bus, and it was pretty cool. We liked it really well, and so we bought it. And then I didn't have a bicycle, and I'd always had a bicycle. All my life I'd had a bicycle, and I think it was Griggs department store there in Pasco. They had 10-speed bicycles on they had a really good deal on 10-speed bicycles. And I had never had one of the later, I'd had a 3-speed bicycle when I was a kid, what we called an English bike, but now they had the one with the multiple sprockets on the back wheel, and so they had that on sale. And so I decided, okay, I'll get one of those. And so we went and we bought it. And so that was our two big purchases on the first President's Day that I was ever aware of, where I could make a purchase. So we took it home, and that afternoon I went out for a bicycle ride. Now in Pasco, they had what you call, and they still do, I suppose, tackweed. Now it's not like goat heads like they have here in Arizona, but it's a smaller version, and I didn't know they had that. So I went out with my new bicycle, went for a ride, and went along the side of the road, and by the time I got home, I had flat tires. And I didn't know why. And then so I learned the lesson that in Pasco they have tackweed. So here comes the car. So anyway, that's when I learned about tackweed, and then as time went by, like you buy an inner tube that's thicker, or you buy tires that are thicker if you live in Pasco, Washington, and that way you don't have that problem. So I learned that lesson. But also that VW bus, I had that for many years. In fact, well, let's see, I can't remember, so we won't go there. But the first thing I did that fall when, or let's see, so that was in February. So when school got out, looks like it got flooded a little bit here. When school got out in June, my wife and I decided, since we had a new car, that we would go up to Banff, Canada, on a little, just, between times when I had to go to college start my 5th year. that we would go to Banff, Canada, and spend a few days up there, and then come back down, and then I would go to summer school. And so, we took the center seat out so we could sleep on the floor, and then we had a little baby boy, and so we put him up on the motor in the back of a VW bus. There's like a little shelf, and that's on top of the motor. So he slept up on that. But the only problem was, it was in June in Banff, Canada. It's freezing cold, and so we didn't know that. So the first night we froze, and then the next day we walked around, did some shopping, and they have a gondola lift that'll take you up to the top of the mountain. You can look at all the stuff, all around. But we were broke. And so you could look around at all the stuff, or we had a choice of taking the gondola lift or spending the money on a little heater. So we spent our money on a little heater, and we skipped the gondola lift. I think I'm going to turn around here because we're getting up to where the dogs park, and I don't like that, so we're just going to go back over this way. So that was our first trip. And then as time went by, the little baby got bigger. So, and somewhere, I probably still have it in my son's backyard there. I taught shop and I could weld. And so I welded up a little frame that would hold a larger child. And the VW bus has little places on the floor where you clamp the seat down, that middle seat. And so what I did was I made the frame just the right size that you could clamp it down. And then my wife, she sewed up a sturdy material so it was like a I just say it was like this, and it fit inside the frame. So as we went down the road, the little boy laid in there and slept when we went down the road. And so that's how we that's how we traveled. And so we had that. And then when we'd go camping or something like that, well, then we used it. The only problem is, when we were coming back from Banff, I didn't realize what you needed to know about a VW bus. And so we camped. There was a campsite that we stopped at between Banff and coming back, because I went to school in Bellingham. And so we were coming back so we could, I don't remember now why, but anyway, we stopped at a campground, and then I couldn't get it to start, but I finally got it to start, and it just didn't want to run right. And so got home, dropped the family off at Pasco, and threw my bicycle in the bus, and headed back up to go to summer school. And that bus was just not running right. It was just not working. So took it to the VW shop, and they said, yeah, you burned the valves. What happens is, with a VW engine, the old VW engines, you got to rev it up to about 5,000 RPM before you shift. See, that's not what you do with back the old days. Like, I remember I had my 41 Ford. If you've been following my channel, I had that 41 Ford. You just don't rev it up with that old engine. And so I didn't want to rev it up. But that's what you do. You rev it up So, so it cost me, believe it or not, it cost me $120 to have them uh, replace the valves and put it back together again. And then I got my VW back. And never again did I have to have the valves ground or anything like that. So anyway, that was my President's Day VW bust. That the first time I ever celebrated President's Day by going out and spending money on all the things and the sales and stuff like that was back in 1966. And then I haven't really paid much attention to the sales on President's Day since then, until just yesterday when my wife was buying everything she could find at the Joann store. My wife worked at a store years ago that it went out of business, and so she felt kind of sorry for the people working at that Joann store because they're closing. They're all losing their jobs, and that's the end of that store. So anyway, that's my story of President's Day, and I want to thank you for watching the video. I don't know if it was a history lesson or if it was anything special. But it's the story of my President's Day experiences. I want to thank you for watching, and God bless.